Imam Al Hassan alayhi salam stands as a symbol of peace. The struggles in his life, however, are undermined by many. Despite the heavy weight of responsibilities that fell on the shoulders of Al-Mujtaba, we see an embodiment of virtue throughout his actions. Although Imam Al Hassan's immaculate character never failed anyone in his time, he was betrayed and accused by those who claimed to love him. In this documentary, we take a look at the historical significance of the peace treaty and distinguish the motives behind it.
Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, was the eldest son, the first child to be born to Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib and Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, peace be upon them. And tradition states that Imam al-Hassan was born on the 15th of the month of Shahr Ramadan in the 3rd year after Hijrah, for after the Battle of Uhud. And it is narrated over here that when Imam al-Hassan was born, Amir al-Mu'mineen took this newborn baby and put him in the arms of Rasulullah. For Imam al-Hassan opened his eyes in the blessed arms of his grandfather, the final prophet of Islam. And the narration then goes on to tell us that it was Rasulullah who named Imam Hassan with this name, Hassan. There is an important point of contemplation over here. As per the attestation of the Quran, Rasulullah does not speak out of his own desire. Allah says in the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in regards to the Holy Prophet, وَمَا يَنْتِكُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. The Prophet does not speak out of his own desire except that it is revelation from the Almighty. For when Rasulullah gives the name to his first grandson, it is not Rasulullah as per his desire. Rather, Rasulullah is manifesting the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is the Almighty Creator who goes as far as even choosing the names for the successors of the Holy Prophet.
And as we understand, Hassan and Hussein, in Arabic grammar you have something called tasghir. Hassan and Hussein are from the same root. Hussein, however, means the younger one or the smaller one. And Imam Hassan salamullah alayhi is of course famous for various things. For example, it is mentioned that whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was mentioned, whenever hell was mentioned, heaven was mentioned, the day of judgment was mentioned, the Imam had one speciality, that he would constantly cry and weep about these things, crying in the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if you notice, it is only that individual who has a pure heart and a soft heart and whose heart is linked with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when you mention Allah or anything in relation to the Yawmuddin, Yawmul Qiyamah, that person will start to cry because of the purity of their heart. So number one, he was famous for having this khushu, famous for having this fear of Allah, famous for his taqwa. His responsibilities were interesting. For example, during the Khilafah of our holy Imam Salamullah alayhi, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Hassan's job was to, for example, take care of all of the envoys or the guests. And so, from his early life, he played a vital role in ensuring political stability, which was seen in later parts of his life as very important. But he also played a very important role in understanding how to govern the people. And he was very close to his father, which is, of course, one of the greatest attributes of the Imam.
There's another famous hadith from the Holy Prophet of Islam where he talks very directly about the peace treaty of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and he says that two groups of Muslims will come to peace through this grandson of mine.
We notice from the many merits of Al-Hassan that he holds a very high rank in spirituality and wisdom. While some people disagree with the decision the Imam had taken with regards to establishing peace, we take a look at the events that cultivated into the peace treaty and why it came about.
regards to what led to the peace treaty and how it cultivated and how it actualized, we need to take a very small back leg into history. So in the 21st of, first of Ramadan, 40 AH, when Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullah alayh is killed in Fajr Salah by Ibn Muljim, his son Imam Hassan, of course being the oldest, being the next Imam, he goes into Masjid al-Kufa. And he gives a beautiful sermon where he says things such as, my father was a great man, he praises his father. Then he says, for example, that I am the son of Rasulullah, because as we know, Hassan and Hussein are the sons of the Holy Prophet of Islam. Then he, for example, says, قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. We are the qurba, we are the near relatives. And he mentions how Imamah is his right, Khilafah is his right. Ibn Abbas, who is there in the crowd, he stands up. And Ibn Abbas, he looks at the whole congregation, he says, look, this person, Hassan al-Mujtaba, he is the son of the daughter of the Holy Prophet. He's the son of Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra, salamullahi alayha. So everyone should do bay'ah and pledge allegiance to him. He is the best person for the job. People stand up, people are cheering, they say, we have unlimited amounts of love for al-Mujtaba.
For the traditions tell us that, or historians tell us, from amongst them, At-Tabari in his Tarikh and Ibn Abul Hadid in Sharaf Nahj al-Balagha, that the Kufan people in their entirety pledged their allegiance to Imam Al Hassan, gave him the bay'ah. Notice in history there are only two people from amongst the Ahlul Bayt whom the people were unanimous in that there was ijma' in giving bay'ah to these two people. Number one, Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, and number two, Amir al-Mu'mineen, after Uthman was killed due to the injustices that he committed on the Ummah. In regards to Saqifa, there wasn't total ijma', there were large groups of people that were against the nomination of Abu Bakr during Saqifa. Regardless, the entire of Kufa gave bay'ah to Imam Al Hassan, and as the news began to spread, the residents of Basra gave bay'ah to Imam Al Hassan, the residents of Hijaz, Mecca and Medina gave bay'ah to Imam Al Hassan, and so did the people of Yemen. From the entire Ummah, the people giving bay'ah to Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, his role as the Khalif of the Ummah and responsibility in terms of obedience was incumbent upon the people. An Imam is an Imam, and his obedience is obligatory on the people regardless of whether they give him bay'ah or not. Meaning the legitimacy of the Imamah of Amir al-Mu'mineen is not affected by the bay'ah and the pledge of allegiance to the people. Whether the people recognize him or not, he is still the Imam. And the same thing for Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba and Sayyid al-Shuhada. Imam Al Hassan wrote a number of letters admonishing Muawiyah and inviting him towards the truth. In fact, in one of the letters that Imam Al Hassan wrote to Muawiyah, he said to him, "O Muawiyah, based on what do you stand for rulership? Based on which premise do you contest me for rulership over the entire Muslim Ummah when you have no known merits in the eyes of Rasulullah? In fact, you and your father were enemies of Islam that had waged war against Rasulullah for a big part of his Risala." As you know, Muawiyah and Abu Sufyan only came under the fold of Islam after the conquest of Mecca. During the last years of Risala, they were never a part of the Islamic struggle. They were never a part of the establishment of the Muslim Ummah. And even when they came under the fold of Islam, they never came in with an element of Iman. Rather, they were from the head of the Munafiqeen, as history bears witness for us. For Imam Al Hassan, approached and admonished Muawiyah in a number of ways, establishing his authority from the text, from the Quran, from the Hadith, them being the ulul amr, them being the people of kunu ma'as sadiqeen, them being the people of tathir, them being the people of wilaya, so on and so forth, giving him numerous proof to try and convince him to come under the authority and the leadership of Imam Al Hassan. Muawiyah being insistent on his enmity and refusing the authority of Imam Al Hassan did not stop there. See, to reject the authority of the Imam is one thing, but to actively come out and threaten him with war, cause havoc in the Islamic lands from an ideological perspective. It was the instigation of Muawiyah that began, it was due to his instigation that people started sending la'na on Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib from the members after every salah. It was Muawiyah who caused ideological havoc and fasad when he stood up to recite Salatul Jum'ah on a Wednesday. It was Muawiyah who had the blood of the Shias of Amir al-Mu'minin, the likes of Hujjar and the likes of Shabib. For Muawiyah, not only had he caused ideological havoc and fasad, but at the same time he had legitimized the consumption of alcohol in Sham, he had legitimized fornication, ajallakumullah, during his rule in Sham. And the fact that he was marauding and causing bloodshed, usurping the lands of the Muslims and the wealth of the Muslims, this was a threat that Imam Al Hassan had to face.
Followers of Ahlul Bayt ﷺ were being persecuted solely for being followers of Ahlul Bayt ﷺ under the rule of Muawiyah. And Imam Hassan ﷺ, through the peace treaties, has sought to identify and sought to document the fact that this is something that was happening and what needed to be stopped.
Once the Imam ignores him, Muawiyah does as is expected of him, that he starts to scheme and spread lies and kill people and cause a lot of havoc in the government of the Imam. And so he causes problems, he spreads mischief and fasad, as is expected of him. Then what happens is that the Imam writes to Muawiyah saying, "Oh Muawiyah, it looks like you want war." Imam doesn't say, "I want war." He says, "Muawiyah, it looks like that you want a war. And if a war will happen, it will happen." Muawiyah took this to mean that Al-Mujtaba wants a war with me. And so Muawiyah takes 70,000 troops and he tells them to march from Damascus towards Iraq. The Imam hears about this, that look, these troops are getting ready, they're marching towards Iraq, and so I need to do something about this. So he goes to his congregation in Masjid al-Kufa. He says, look, Muawiyah is someone who wants the Khilafah even though he is not worthy of it. It has nothing to do with him. Muawiyah is now leading troops towards us to fight with us. Who of you is ready to fight with me against Muawiyah in battle? When he said that, history narrates that all of the individuals that were there had their faces down. In other words, they did not want to look at the Imam. They did not want to join the Imam in jihad. They were embarrassed. They were all looking down. As he says that and they're looking down, there's a man by the name of Qais bin Sa'ad. Qais bin Sa'ad, this individual, was a supporter of the Imam. He stands up, he encourages every single one of them that you have to protect the son of Rasulullah and the son of Zahra salamullahi alayhim. And so it is said within history that 40,000 people are prepared to be with Imam al-Mujtaba and they are at a certain camp. So they are resting at that camp, they are waiting, they are training. In the same time, Muawiyah has how many people? 70,000 troops. Now the Imam realizes that I can't take all 40,000 together in one go towards Muawiyah. So he splits the army, number one, into 4,000 people, 4,000 troops, and he delegates an individual. He says, you have complete command over these 4,000, and you need to take them and go towards Muawiyah and fight him. And you need to pledge allegiance with me, O individual, O commander, that you will not betray me. Because of course betrayal was rife. That individual says, Ya Aba Muhammad, I accept that I will work with complete honesty. I will take these troops towards Muawiyah. As expected, when Muawiyah hears that these 4,000 troops are about to come, he somehow reaches that commander and he bribes him. He says, I'll give you a job, I'll give you employment, I'll give you a great status, I'll give you a mansion, etc., etc.
Imam Al Hassan strategically placed a part of his army in Madain and a part of his army in Maskan. Maskan was supposed to be the battleground because it was a wide open land, huge plain. It was an appropriate place to conduct battle. Whereas Madain was that place that covered entry into the lands of Iran and into the lands of Fars. So to protect that borderline was important. As well, Madain was a strategic place because from Madain they were able to send military supplies into Maskan. So this shows us the way the Imam planned his army, the way he strategically placed them to face Muawiyah. The fact that Imam Al Hassan Al Mujtaba was ready to go into war with Muawiyah shows us that in this way Imam Al Hassan was walking in the same path as his father, Amir Al Mu'mineen. It is a shame that a lot of historians have accused Imam Al Hassan as not being courageous enough to fight against Muawiyah, and therefore he had to retreat to making a peace treaty. This is a fallacy. Imam Al Hassan has a great experience as a warrior and has great credentials behind him. He participated in the Battle of Jamal, he participated in the Battle of Siffin, he participated in the Battle of Naharwan as well.
Then the Imam realized that I have to now take the army in my own command by myself because I can't trust to delegate responsibility to any other individual. So Imam al-Mujtaba, people that say, for example, that the Imam was a coward or the Imam did not want to fight, what about this in history, where he goes himself? He takes the army himself. He doesn't sit back and relax. He takes the army himself. He gives a speech in front of his 20,000. He says, look, every single one of you has to be with me. I need your support, I need your unity, etc., etc. As he says that, he returns into the tent, in his own tent. Abu Muhammad Al Hassan Al Mujtaba, the son of Rasulullah, the son of Zahra, the son of Ali Al Murtada, when he returns into his tent, there's an ambush. They steal his turban, they steal his clothing, they steal his musalla, they steal all the things in his tent. They attack him. The oppression of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba is not little. They attack him. It is said within some narrations, they stab him so hard in the thigh, the wound reaches the bone, and there is constant blood flowing. He is attacked, they all go away. He's there bleeding, his brother is there with him protecting him, Imam Al Hussein salamullah alayhi. He realizes that these people are not going to support me. So then he goes back. Of course, he has no army, he has no people. How can he then confront Muawiyah? Muawiyah has now nearly double of his army. He goes back and Muawiyah then sends a letter saying, "Oh Hassan al-Mujtaba, I ask for you peace. And I think that we should have a peace treaty." Now one very important thing comes. Does the Imam himself decide that we need a peace treaty? No. He asks all the people there because he says, look, if we, for example, deny Muawiyah the peace treaty, then all of your lives will be lost. Not some of your lives, not the majority of your lives, every single one. So it is up to you, O people. Are you ready for this peace treaty or not? Do you want to accept this peace treaty or do you want to support me and fight Muawiyah? They reply, we do not want to fight Muawiyah, we want to accept the peace treaty. They weren't ready to give up their lives. Of course, they may have been 10 people, 12 people, the close companions. But the rest said, we are not willing to do so. So then the Imam says, okay, because it is your lives in hand, I will accept the peace treaty because you have told me to. Because there's no other option. Because if there's no support from me, and I go then to march Muawiyah with 10 troops, it will be a massacre. And the religion of Islam at that point, just after the death of Amir al-Mu'mineen, required some stability. It required having an Imam for a good period of time. So the Imam couldn't be killed very quickly, very easily. And so when Muawiyah then sends this peace treaty, the Imam says, okay, we'll accept and we'll have the conditions. So this was the lead up towards this peace treaty, based on, number one, betrayal with the Imam, lack of support for the Imam, even though they showed, on the apparent they look like we have support, but they left the Imam afterwards. Lack of support, lack of trust.
And there were a number of categories of people who pledged allegiance to Imam Hassan. The first type of people were those people who were weak. They did not have Iman at the depth of their heart. These were people who would move with the wind. Today, because the general public is giving bay'ah to Imam Hassan, they move with the wind, they go with Imam Hassan. Tomorrow people go and give bay'ah to Muawiyah, they will move with Muawiyah. These were not people of determination. weak-hearted people, those who would move with the wind. Number two, there were those people who were opportunists within the residents of Kufa. They saw the pledging of allegiance to Imam Hassan as being a vehicle to wage war against Muawiyah. Just because they pledged allegiance to Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba does not mean that they loved him. They only pledged allegiance to him because they bared enmity towards Muawiyah, and they saw the Khilafah of Imam Hassan as being a perfect vehicle, as a perfect tool to wage war and to gain their own materialistic desires. They saw this as an opportunity. This was the second group of people. And the third group of people that were amongst those who pledged allegiance to Imam Hassan were the Munafiqeen. These were spies who were planted in Kufa by Muawiyah on purpose to pledge allegiance to him. But at a very Zahiri level, by them pledging allegiance to him, what they would do is they would report back on all the military and the social conditions that Imam Hassan was facing. An example of this is that, will you believe that one of the people who had pledged allegiance to Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba was Shimr bin al-Jawshan? Shimr, la'natullah alayh, the head of the Khawarij, is siding with Imam Hassan to fight against Muawiyah. Why? Because for him this is an opportunity to gain the materialistic, for him to make a materialistic gain. Today Shimr pledges allegiance to Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. A number of years later, he is the one leading a war against Sayyid al-Shuhada. Just goes to show you that these were mercenaries who had no loyalty towards Ahlul Bayt whatsoever. They did not see the pledge of allegiance being as a religious obligation, a wajib shar'i ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon them. This was just a means for them to continue with their politics and cause havoc in the dunya. For Imam Al Hassan was fully aware of the circumstances and the situation of the army that he was commanding. He was fully aware of these group of people and this wide spectrum of people that were within his army. He took this into consideration and he acted according to that situation.
In the Battle of Siffin, you agreed to my father, Amir al-Mu'mineen, taking arbitration with Muawiyah, because there was the issue of arbitration between Muawiyah and Amir al-Mu'mineen. Imam Mujtaba says, you people accepted, you wanted arbitration, you wanted him to have this sort of sulh between Muawiyah. When he did so, you then went against him. Because the Khawarijites, those individuals, they went against Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayhi because of this issue of arbitration, when they were the individuals who primarily wanted it. Imam al-Mujtaba says, in the same way, the people told me in Masjid al-Kufa that they want the peace treaty. When I accepted the peace treaty, they went against me.
Who was going to suffer if they went into war? You see, together with all these disloyal people who were there, Imam Al Hassan commanded an army of some of the most loyal Shias within Kufa. There were the likes of Hujr ibn Adi, there were the likes of Ibrahim, the son of Malik al-Ashtar, not to forget the Bani Hashim that were there. For there was a group and a large contingency of loyal Shias, and when Imam Hassan was contemplating over what strategic decision to take, he took into consideration the life and the blood of these group of Shias. Which is why he says that I engaged into the peace treaty to defend the blood of the Shias. It is wrong to say that Imam Hassan was forced into a peace treaty and that he had no choice. In fact, it's opposite. It was a strategic decision. And on top of this, do not even think for the slightest moment that despite the disloyalty in the army of Imam Al Hassan and despite the fact that there were traitors, that Muawiyah had the courage to face Imam Al Hassan in war. Despite all these challenges, Muawiyah was a coward and did not have an ounce of courage in facing Imam Al Hassan. Why? Because within the army of Imam Hassan there was Sayyid al-Shuhada, there was Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, there was Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, there were the likes of, as we just mentioned, Ibrahim ibn Malik al-Ashtar and Hujjar ibn Adi, seasoned warriors who had proved their mettle in the wars of Jamal and Siffin. Muawiyah had faced heavy defeat in Siffin until they went and they raised their copies of the Quran on the spear. So he knew that as long as he comes forward and engages them in war, there is a possibility he might face death. And you know, munafiqeen like these, they love their life and they love the dunya. They have nothing to look forward to in the akhirah. For Muawiyah, despite all these challenges that the army of Imam Al Hassan faced, was very reluctant to go into war with Imam Al Hassan.
To say that Imam Hussein alayhi salam had few followers and he still fought while Imam Hussein alayhi salam did not, is to simplify the situation. It's to say that Imam Hussein alayhi salam went out seeking to fight. This could not be further from the truth. He did not go out seeking to fight. He went out seeking to protect the religion of Islam. And what we see is that the common factor, and that every single Imam, whether it's Imam Hassan alayhi salam or any other Imam, is that we're going to seek out the course of action which will protect the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam and the religion of Islam. If that outcome is reached through a peace treaty, then there will be a peace treaty. If the outcome is reached through fighting, then we're going to fight. Whatever it takes to reach that outcome. So the goal is to save the religion of Islam and to protect followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. If that goal, however that goal is reached, in whichever way, is the method that we will take.
After the peace treaty was signed off, Al-Hasan was never able to live in peace. Regardless of the difficulties that the peace treaty supposedly intended to ease, the people insisted on blaming Al-Hasan for defects. The question then arises, what was the kind of treatment that Al-Hasan had to endure, and what went wrong?
6 major points from the peace treaty. Number 1, Muawiyah would stop cursing Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib from the minbar. Number 2, Muawiyah would stop harassing and persecuting the Shias of Imam Ali. Number 2. Number 3, that Muawiyah, upon his death, would not appoint any other leader after him. Rather, this apparent leadership would come back to Imam Hassan or to Imam Al Hussein. Number 3. Number 4, there would be a sum or a certain amount of money from the Baytul Mal that Muawiyah would give to Imam Al Hassan. People use this point to say that Imam Hassan sold his Khilafah to Muawiyah in order for an amount of money. Khata, injustice. Because if they read onto history, Imam Hassan asked for an amount of money from the Baytul Mal to come towards him such that they can be distributed to sustain the families of those shuhada that were killed in the battle of Jamal and in the battle of Siffin. These people were killed to a large extent because of the dealings of Muawiyah. Battle of Siffin, the atrocities that committed because of Muawiyah. Battle of Jamal, Aisha was present there and Muawiyah had a big hand in instigating this battle as well. For Imam Al Hassan, when he asked the money to provide for the well-beings of the family of the shuhada. This was another part of the peace treaty. Look at these 2 conditions that Imam Al Hassan puts forward, and these are mentioned in Ilal al-Shara'i by Sheikh al-Saduq. Imam Hassan clearly put one of the conditions in the peace treaty as being that nobody can address Muawiyah with the title of Amir al-Mu'mineen. If you are not Amir al-Mu'mineen, which means Prince of Believers or the Commander of the Believers, the army, the chief of the believers, what are you? Straight away, by putting this point in the peace treaty, Imam Hassan makes it very clear for the Muslim Ummah at that time and for the generations to come that Muawiyah has no religious legitimacy in the rulership that he has. You are not Amir al-Mu'mineen. You are not an Amir. You are not a commander for the Mu'mineen, the believers in the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Furthermore, it says, وَلَا يُقِيمْ عِنْدَهُ الشَّهَادَةِ. It says that nobody from the Muslim Ummah can go to Muawiyah and use him for bearing testimony. His testimony is not valid in the eyes of Islam. If there is a divorce, you need 2 witnesses. Muawiyah can't be the witness. Citing the Hilal for Shahrul Ramadan, you need a witness. Even that Muawiyah does not have legitimacy. Then what about Islamic legitimacy in terms of being the Imam of the Ummah? Funnily, Muawiyah agreed to all of this, and by Imam Hassan designating this sulh, he made it very clear to the people that this authority that Muawiyah is killing for, the blood that he is shedding in order to get an authority, is an authority that we give him, having recognized that it has no Islamic legitimacy.
The peace treaty in itself led to certain people thinking that Imam Hassan ﷺ had refused to fight or had shown an unwillingness to get involved in battle, when of course this was not the case. A army had been raised, however people had deserted him and left. So some people accused him of having given in to Muawiyah and not to have fought like his father Amir al-Mu'minin did, despite the fact that it is very clear, again from the life of the Holy Prophet of Islam, that to sign a peace treaty or to have a truce with somebody is not to give in, is not to submit or a display of cowardice, but rather a need of that particular moment in time. Just as the Holy Prophet of Islam, having fought the disbelievers, the Makkans, at Badr and Uhud, later signed a peace treaty with those same people at Hudaybiyah. Similarly, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, at that particular moment in time, found it the most prudent measure to sign a peace treaty with Muawiyah in order to protect the religion and, more importantly, protect the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam from more destruction or more harm that would have come to them.
This peace treaty was a strategic move that was implemented to protect the well-being of the Shias, to protect the lives of the Shias, and to protect the Islamic faith from any sort of distortion at the hands of Muawiyah. The idea that Muawiyah coming forward and trying to convince the people or even come forward with the notion that his rulership has any sort or any connotation, any flavor of divinity, was outside the window through this peace treaty. This was a strategic move to give him apparent power over the dunya in exchange for the sanctity and safeguarding the lives of the Muslims and protecting the teachings of Islam from any type of distortion.
But what we understand is that in every single one of those conditions mentioned in the peace treaty, Muawiyah goes against. Muawiyah does not rule by Quran and Sunnah. Muawiyah does not protect the Muslimin or the Shia Muslims or the Ahlul Bayt. Muawiyah does not give back the Khilafah. Muawiyah continues the cursing of Amir al-Mu'mineen. So he may have signed the treaty. In fact, books say that he stamped with his own personal stamp. He looked at the treaty with his own hands and eyes. He signed it with his own hands.
For Imam Al Hassan, when he made this contract, when he made this peace treaty, he knew that Muawiyah is going to violate each and every one of them. But there is a wisdom, because people such as myself and yourself, 1400 years later, when we review this historic treaty, the way it was made and the way it was honored, history makes very clear for us who is Salih and who is the Fasiq, who is the mu'min and who is not. He did not honor a single one of these treaties. Cursing Amirul Mu'mineen, this continued until the time of Abdul Malik, Walid ibn Abdul Malik, or Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. During their time, the cursing of Amirul Mu'mineen continued. Killing of the Shi'as. It was after the peace treaty made by Imam Al Hassan that Hujr ibn Adi was killed. Hujr ibn Adi, Sahabi, Jalil, buried in Sham. And just like the way the remainders of Bani Umayyah went ahead and desecrated his grave close to a month back, Muawiyah had beheaded and had killed Hujr for his alliance and his love towards, his loyalty towards Amirul Mu'mineen. For Muawiyah never honored any sort or any condition from this peace treaty. He went ahead and he gave himself the title of Amirul Mu'mineen. On what basis? On the fact that his sister was married to Rasulullah, which means he becomes Khal of the Mu'mineen, and somehow the title Amirul Mu'mineen comes in. Khata, he went ahead and paying people to distort tafasir of the Quran, to the credentials and the fada'il, the merits that were given to Amirul Mu'mineen were attributed to the enemies of Amirul Mu'mineen. Furthermore, the last part of the contract, in that Muawiyah would not appoint or designate anybody as a leader after him, he violated it through the appointment of Yazid.
For example, Sayyid al-Shuhada, he had ilm al-batini that he was going to be killed on the plains of Karbala on the 10th of Muharram at this exact time. But he was not allowed to do anything about it because it was ilm al-batin. In the same way, Imam al-Mujtaba salamullah alayhi knew that Muawiyah will go against this, but this was ilm al-batin. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set out this law that the A'imma and the Ahlul Bayt cannot interfere in that ilm, in that realm of the knowledge which is in the batini stage. Also, we understand that the Imam wanted to show the people. He wanted to show the people that, look, what I have placed as conditions are open and clear. He wanted to show the people that, look, Muawiyah is so deceiving that even though the 5 conditions, 6 conditions were set, he goes against them. He was trying to show the people the reality of Muawiyah.
Imam Hussein becomes the Imam, takes the responsibility of Imamah, and for 10 years, Imam Al Hussein lived during the time of Muawiyah, but Imam Al Hussein did not go to war, which shows us that the Ma'soom Imam, his judgment is infallible. He knows that this is the best way to protect the Ummah and protect the interests of the Ummah. And for this reason, truthfully, the sulh, which we call between Muawiyah and Imam Hassan as being Sulh al-Hasan, technically should be called Sulh al-Hasanain, because Imam Hussein abided by the same peace treaty that Imam Hassan had put forward. And Imam Hussein only went into war when every aspect of this peace treaty was distorted, or was dishonored. So long as even one condition of the peace treaty was abided by, Imam Hussein did not go into war, which is why he only went into war when Yazid was appointed as the Khalif. But not a single condition from the peace treaty remains in place, which means it's violated. The entire contract is violated.
There were many misconceptions that formed against the peace treaty of Imam Al Hassan alayhi salam, numerous of which remain unclear until today. We answer some of the main misjudgments that are put forward, defaming the Imam alayhi salam.
First thing we understand is that till today, whether you look at it in an academic sense, as in the Western academic books and sources, or even some of the traditional books, what they primarily accuse the Imam of is they say that he took a very nice salary from Muawiyah. He left everything, he left Islam, and he had a very quiet and peaceful life in Medina while Islam was running away into the wrong paths. Till today, you will find individuals who call themselves Western academics. I've heard this from my own ears. An individual who says he is a in-depth researcher in history. This individual says, oh, Hassan was nothing compared to Hussein. And what did Hassan do? He took the salary from Muawiyah and he relaxed in Medina. This person has not understood the sources, because the sources were corrupted. Both traditional sources and the Western academic sources are corrupted. The fourth and one of the biggest misconceptions till today rife is that people say, these historians say, these corrupt historians who have not researched properly, they say that Imam Hussein salamullah alayhi was against the peace treaty, and he was against his brother Imam Hassan from doing so. This is their allegation. What's the answer to this? The first answer is that if Imam Hussein salamullah alayhi was against the peace treaty with Muawiyah, why is it after the death of his brother Imam Al Hassan salamullah alayhi, he did the same thing? 10 years or 11 years after the death of his brother, he stood quiet in Medina. He was propagating Islam. He did not go straight away. If he was against the peace treaty, then the moment Imam Hassan had died, he would go on and march towards Muawiyah. He didn't. He waited 10, 11 years. So number one, he was of course in support of it. Number two, he had him in fact said in history, this line of Imam Hussein is noted, that while Muawiyah is alive, every single one of our followers should stay at home. When he is dead, then you come out. Because Muawiyah is very cunning. Muawiyah has a lot of power. People are completely lost in the intoxication of Muawiyah. Imam Hussein, if he was against the peace treaty, would he say this? Of course he wouldn't. Thirdly, Imam Hussein salamullah alayhi was asked. People came to him, oh, Aba Abdullah, ya Aba Abdullah, let's go, let's fight against Muawiyah, let's leave this peace treaty. He said no. The peace treaty is what is best for the Muslims at this time, and I am supporting my brother al-Mujtaba, who has done this only for the sake of the people. In other words, if you look at all of the traditional reports, the authentic reports, if you actually research and go into the different books and different sources, you find Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, in fact, was the most bravest individual of his time for doing what he did with the peace treaty.
There should be no excuses or no avenues left to for anybody to accuse Imam Hassan of not doing his best in order to avoid the worst outcome, or rather to say that he tried to achieve the best outcome given the circumstances that he had. In this particular regard, we see that Imam Hassan by ensuring that these conditions are documented in a peace treaty, makes sure and makes it very clear and historically documented for time to come that this is what was happening in the time and under the rulership of Muawiyah in that particular time. Whereas prior, we may not have been able to even prove the fact that Amir al-Mu'minin was being cursed from the pulpits, or that followers of Ahlul Bayt were being persecuted in the lands. But by putting on a peace treaty and having a signature from both Imam Hassan and from Muawiyah, Muawiyah implicitly accepts that this is everything that's happening.
And in the peace treaty, he says, I am leaving Khilafah for you. That doesn't mean I am accepting you as Khalif. Because if Imam al-Mujtaba accepted Muawiyah as Khalif and had surrendered to his will and was doing bay'ah of him, would he then go and get troops ready? Would he, if this was the case, don't you think Muawiyah would have given the Imam some sort of position? If Imam al-Mujtaba had done bay'ah to Muawiyah, it's enough to say we would know about it. Because history wouldn't be quiet about it. We would know about it. Nowhere in the documents do you find that al-Mujtaba surrendered to Muawiyah as Khalif. No, he realized, I am the rightful Imam. If he wants Khilafah, he can take it. I want to protect the Muslimin, the Shia Muslims, the Ahlul Bayt, and myself, because I need to ensure that there is stability in the Muslim world.
If we look at the peace treaty and we say that it's a example of surrender, then we would be accusing the Holy Prophet of Islam, who also signed a peace treaty, of saying that he surrendered to non-Muslims. So all these conditions show that Imam Hassan, what he's trying to do is trying to get the most favorable outcome. The most important point here is that because Muawiyah brings about who initiates the request for a peace treaty, if Imam Hassan did not fulfill this request, there could have been an accusation that he is instigating war, he's instigating bloodshed, he's instigating the fighting, and that even though Muawiyah has offered a truce, the Imam is not accepting it. So the Imam Al Hassan, by accepting it, wants to show that the religion of Islam, in its core essence, is a religion which emphasizes and desires peace. It does not desire war. We will fight where there is a need for fighting, but it's not a religion which desires for war. And so if there is an offering of peace, then we're going to accept that offering to show that we desire to have peace.
History emphasizes the noble role of Al Hassan during his leadership. We extract some of the many lessons that can be derived from his life and highlight some of the benefits of the peace treaty.
What we learn from Imam Hassan alayhi most importantly throughout his life, and one of the greatest examples that we derive from the stories that we learn from his life, is the aspect of being able to overcome difficulty and to see the bigger picture. Is to see that actions are not just limited to what we can see right now, but have consequences for years and decades to come. And so great leadership comes from those who have the foresight to see what their actions will do, what their actions will result in, what reactions those actions will have in the future. And Imam Hassan alayhi salam demonstrates to us that while those people in his time were not able to see what his actions will result in because they lacked that foresight, he himself had the foresight to see how those actions would affect the actions that will take place in the future, and how they will be so vital for the actions that will take place in the future. So it shows us that character is not about the other person, it's about me. It's about what I and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects of me, regardless of what the other person does. So Imam Hassan alayhi salam has a very difficult time. We see that after the peace treaty, he's called Mudillul Mu'mineen, the one who disgraced the believers. Yet, he still acts with impeccable akhlaq.
The first thing we learn from the leadership of Imam al-Mujtaba salamullah alayhi is that you ensure in your life that you never trust anyone. You can only trust a very small number of people. Because Imam al-Mujtaba, he tried to show us this from this peace treaty, from all of the things that led to the peace treaty. He tried to show us that, look, I trusted 3 people. Each and every single one of them pledged allegiance to be faithful to me, and each one betrayed me. I am trying to show you, O Shia Muslims, O Muslimin, O humans, 1400 years later, that make sure you don't trust everyone. Everyone is not always as trustworthy as you may think. Number 2, what we understood from the leadership of the Imam is that he always looked at what was best for the people. His reputation was of course ruined because of these people. They called him a coward. People would come up to him and say, "Oh Mujtaba, what have you done to us? We never thought we'd see this day that Muawiyah was ruling." But what he did was for the betterment of the Muslimin and the general public. That's the second thing we understand. Whatever you do should be for the betterment of the innocent people, for the Muslimin. The third thing we understood is that the Imam in his leadership was very clever. He was very clever. Of course, he knew that Muawiyah would go against this, but he showed us how it is that you make contracts, how it is that you set conditions, and what the best way is to work with an oppressive ruler. He showed us is that in this day and age, when there are oppressive rulers all over the world, in all different countries, Imam al-Mujtaba showed us how to go against these oppressive rulers in our day-to-day lives. That if we have people, then we protest, etc., etc. And if we are unable to physically work, then we work through paper. He worked through paper, how? Peace treaty. How can we work through paper? Petition. In this way, he showed us that there are always 2 sides to going against any oppressor. Physically or through the pen.
What the peace treaty does is it shows us the difference. One of the benefits of the peace treaty, as opposed to the fighting, is that in the fighting, we would not have been able to tell the difference between the people who are loyal, who were really loyal to Imam Hassan, and the people who are there only for their own vested interests. But what the peace treaty does is it shows us that there were certain people who were loyal to Imam Hassan, who were very few. just as the people who were loyal to Amir al-Mu'minin before him were also very few. But the people who had their vested interests, who felt that perhaps if they were fighting, Imam Hassan would be successful and they would receive some worldly benefits out of the battle being victorious, then those people were exposed for the reality of what they were. Because Imam Hassan alayhi salam, as I mentioned, wanted to show that if there's a drive for peace, then we will not be the ones who will reject it. We will always try to make sure that there is an outcome without fighting. And if that means that we have to give up some worldly benefits, then so be it.
After all these acts of treason and all these defects, Muawiyah was still reluctant to go into war. He sent a blank letter or a blank piece of paper to Imam Al Hassan with his signature at the end, telling Imam Hassan that you make a peace treaty, put any condition that you want in return for me to take apparent rulership of the Ummah, and I will abide by it. For Imam Al Hassan sees that there is a chance to subdue this threat and this nuisance. There is a chance to protect the blood of the Muslim Ummah, and at the same time strategically control leadership over the Ummah in terms of spirituality. In fact, more than spirituality, when you look into the clauses that are put forward by Imam Al Hassan, this was a strategic move implemented to, number one, expose and subdue the threat of Muawiyah. And the sulh of Imam Al Hassan follows in the same footsteps that Rasulullah carried while implementing the sulh of Hudaybiyah. Same situation, same circumstances, same benefit. One of the benefits of sulh Hudaybiyah was what? That after that, the conquest of Mecca happened as a result of the violation of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And after the Treaty of Imam Al Hassan, what happens? This opened the gateway to the Battle of Karbala, which made Islam eternal until the Day of Judgment. The first step towards the eternal victory of Tashayyu' was the sulh of Imam Al Hassan.
One of the greatest benefits that's derived from the peace treaty is that every single person who is present in Karbala is preserved for that great sacrifice, because Imam Hassan alayhi salatu salam knows very well that there is a Karbala to come, and that people, those important members and those important figures in Karbala will be needed. If fighting takes place today and they're killed, then they won't be in Karbala. So by signing a peace treaty, Imam Hassan alayhi salam preserves those people for Karbala, and on his deathbed reminds Imam Hassan alayhi salam that there's no day like your day, which tells us that Imam Hassan alayhi salatu salam is saying that I've signed a peace treaty so that people are preserved and resources are preserved for that day, which is like no other day.
People didn't see the hikmah behind the sulh. Imam Al Hassan says that what I done for the Shi'as through this peace treaty is better than what the sun shines upon. It is through this peace treaty that the Shi'as were able to live, and through them future generations of Shia were to be born, to keep alive the message of Ahlul Bayt.
The peace treaty of Al Hassan opened the doors to the victory of Karbala. Just as Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, signed a peace treaty at Hudaybiyah, Al Hassan follows in his grandfather's footsteps. The nobility of his decision echoes throughout time, and today we realize that without the peace treaty, many historic facts would have been dismantled.